Hey everybody, it's Pineapple, and this is going to be part 3 in my series covering the top 5 mysteries. So we have 5 more mysteries in My Hero Academia Explained, and we're going to cover those today. But starting off, if you've been watching these videos, you know how we do. Bonus question for you to answer in the comment section below. I'll be diving into the comment section an hour after the video is uploaded to reply to these questions. But which One For All user do you think gave All For One the most trouble in their fight against All For One in the past, right? We know that to a certain extent, he kind of stomped most of them. And also, I know that the obvious answer is going to be All Might. We're not using All Might. Don't include All Might. Don't include Deku. Which previous One For All user besides that do you think put up the biggest fight? I want to know whose quirk do you think was the most annoying for him to deal with, and who was the hardest for him to catch, right? So all of that can be included in your answer. Please let me know. I love hearing these comments. I love seeing these comments to these bonus questions and whatnot. We've been having a lot of dialogue lately on the channel back and forth, so let's keep that going and let's talk. So if you haven't been watching this series, or maybe you've missed it, this is going to be the 3rd video in the series of top 5 unsolved mysteries in My Hero Academia. You can check out the last 2 in the link above. It's going to be in a little card right here. You can check out. It'll take you straight to the playlist, but let's get started on this one. Mystery number 1 for this video. It's kind of a long question, actually. If Shigaraki's current form is due to the quirk Singularity, then does that mean when everything is said and done, people's quirks will truly fuse with their body on a higher level, like how Shigaraki now has the ability to grow infinite hands and fingers despite Aizawa's quirk being used on him at the same time? So if you know what the quirk singularity theory, or maybe you haven't really been like paying attention to that in My Hero Academia, the quirk singularity theory is a theory posed by Dr. Garaki far in the past, early in his life before he was like the old kind of immortal doctor that he is now. It was a theory that eventually, one day, quirks would get so strong. As they're passed down, we know quirks are growing in strength. The next generation's quirks are more complex and more powerful, pretty much in general, than the last generation's quirks. So we know that there's going to come a point where quirks become so powerful, it's hard for the human body to contain them and use them, right? I feel like the phrase was actually contain them. And at that point, it's going to be hard for a person when their quirk activates for the first time, like, when they're 4 or whatever age they are, to really handle that and not have like widespread devastation happen, kind of like in the vein of like what happened to Shigaraki, right? Or Eri, right? Where they both used their quirks for the first time and there was negative effects. Eri, we know that she pretty much rewinded one of her parents back into nothing, right? Just kind of like turned them into a little speck on the ground. That's likely what happened to one of her parents. And we know with Tenko or Shigaraki, everyone was gone, right? Like the whole house had to be pretty much crumbled and destroyed. So there is this thing where quirks are becoming that strong that like upon first activation, they're already going to pose a threat, and they're not going to be this gradual thing that you can like really learn about and really break down as you get older, so you can kind of come into the ability, and then it'll get stronger when you're older because you have a better use over it, right? We may come to a point where people can't even like control it on a basic level, to go to UA or anything like that, where they can learn how to better control their quirk. They're just going to be too powerful. So that, to a certain extent, is like a quirk doomsday theory. I'm pretty sure we've covered it on this channel before, but that is pretty much a future where no one is going to be able to control their quirks. So humanity in the fictional world of My Hero Academia is going to go extinct because quirk users are going to destroy everything, right? Even destroying things for the non-quirk users. But here we're actually offered a very, very different explanation, right? We're offered a very, very different possible future with the fact that Shigaraki is the living embodiment of the final quirk singularity theory, right? And what's happened to him? It seems like Shigaraki's regeneration ability has pretty much become complete in his body. That's what we can call it, right? Because even though Aizawa is using his quirks on him, he can grow, he can continue to overgrow pretty much different body parts. And so far we've seen hands and stuff like that and fingers, but he can continuously grow those just at will, just as part of his body. So if we can assume that the quirk has actually fused with his body, becoming like a very integral part of who he is, not just like a quirk factor inside your body, which is like a unit of measurement for like this energy that is in your body. Let's say the energy in your body suffuse itself with you perfectly and literally fuse with you entirely, becoming a perfect part of who you are, and becomes more of like a special ability that you have than like a superpower, right? Then what does that mean for people who have different quirks than regenerative quirks? You know what I mean? Like, what does that mean for someone like Dabi, let's say? Because right now we see Dabi going through a very, very strange process. He's kind of like burning apart and tearing apart, and we know that there is something odd with Dabi, right, in his past, like something odd of his quirk that we aren't really too sure about. What if Dabi is nearing the point of singularity, right? He has such a powerful quirk, an Endeavor's quirk that was kind of passed on to him. His mom comes from a very, very prestigious line of quirk users. They have a very important quirk. What if just that combination, just that very specific kind of like engineering of a human being leads to Dabi reaching the Quirk singularity point earlier than you're supposed to. Kind of how like Deku is beyond the point of Quirk singularity at this point, right? And what if Dabi is somehow able to become like a living flame, like the embodiment of his quirk, literally, like just hell flame? And what if that's partially why we don't have the name of Dabi's quirk so far, right? Like, what if it's kind of like a situation in My Hero Academia Vigilantes? I guess we could really spin this off into an entirely separate video, but it's kind of like a situation in Vigilantes where we saw number 6, his quirk pretty much took over his body, even in death, right? And I feel like that's something we can maybe see with Dabi, right? Or maybe see with other characters that deal with the quirk singularity. But that's where I'm going to lean this question over to you guys. Do you guys think that's how the quirk singularity works? And if you do, how do you think it would affect characters like Dabi or other characters like that have elemental quirks or other quirks? Will they really truly start to embody their quirks in like a more literal way? Or do you think like this is a special case of Shigaraki because of the surgery? And if so, what do you think the actual quirk singularity is going to be like then for other people in the future? Question 2, we're going to go a slightly sillier route, but I do think this is a very important question to ask. If Tamaki, otherwise known as Suneater, ate somebody's blood like Toga, would he be able to copy their quirk too? And I guess kind of a bonus question to that, if he like, because you know his body parts turn into the body parts of the thing that he ate, would he be able to make like a person's head, right? Or like if he ate someone's blood who has a quirk that is only activated by their hands, would he be able to make their hands, right? Like it's kind of horrifying to think that he could just have like, you know, scaly hand come out of his hand like this, right? And use decay on the ground or something weird like that, like, that's kind of scary. So do you think Tamaki to a certain extent could have someone's blood and copy their quirk too? This is something that we've seen from another obviously ingestion-based quirk like Toga's. You can ingest someone's blood and copy their quirk depending on their relationship and depending on how well they knew each other or something like that. There is like a activation requirement for her to be able to copy someone's blood, and I don't think we know to a true extent what it is. I think she has to have love for them, obviously, and previously we thought she has to really want to be them, but I don't think she really wanted to be twice, right? Maybe now she does because he's gone, so it kind of meets that requirement. Oh, that's sad. Now she wants to be him just to see him again. I wonder if Tamaki or Suneater, right, kind of falls under a similar premise, right? Where he can take a person's DNA and then activate their quirk or give himself a similar ability for kind of like a short cooldown period, right? And if so, whose blood would you have him take in this situation, right? I believe Tamaki is with Nejire. I don't remember what battlefield they're on, if they're on the All for One battlefield, if they're on the Shigaraki battlefield, or where they're... No, I don't think they're on the Shigaraki battlefield, actually. But maybe that's my brain just telling me that they are, because I tend to be wrong when I try to remember where certain characters are in arcs like this, like battlefields. So whose blood do you think would be the most useful for Tamaki to take if he could, right? Like I kind of think Mirio or someone else, just because Mirio's not going to do anything with it. He's a bum. So might as well just take a little bit of his blood and kind of do something cool with that. But do you think that Tamaki still has a role left to play in the series? And if he does, do you think we're going to see this question answered, right? Because I feel like this has been a long running question in the series, actually. Like what would happen if he had someone's blood, right? Because we know, we kind of have a little bit of an answer to this. We know that if he eats the crystal off a crystal user's body, he can then use the crystal, right? But is that just because he ate crystal and he can make crystal, right? He's kind of copying the effect of the quirk without literally using the quirk itself. So while that is kind of like a half answer, while we know that he can kind of copy the effects of quirks if he eats the matter that comes off of a quirk, could he do something like that if he had Shoto's blood, right? Could he make ice? Could he make fire? Because how is he going to eat fire? You know what I mean? Like, and if so, do you think that would be a possible like desperation strategy for him to try and use if that situation ever comes up, right? If he ever is near someone and it's just like, all right, all or nothing. Guess we need 2 of these. All right, let's do it. Do you think that's possible? And do you think that's something that Tamaki would even do, right? So let me know in the comment section below. That is the second kind of goofy. It's a little funny, honestly, but I know that is a big question that some people want answered, because anytime we talk about Tamaki on the timeline or in the comment section in a video, someone asks that question. So I feel like it's definitely one of the top unsolved mysteries in My Hero Academia. I think maybe it's the kind of thing that Horikoshi would answer in a Q&A in the future of the series, but I definitely think it was interesting enough to include in this video. The next question is something that I know we all want to have an answer to, and it's, will we ever see the previous users of One for All fighting against All for One in full detail, right? Like the actual flashbacks to their individual fights. Will we ever see that? Because I know in Naruto, it was a big thing. We haven't seen Madara versus Hashirama. In the whole series, we're all waiting to see Madara versus Hashirama in a flashback, right? Especially once you get to the war arc and everything, you're like, give me this. I need to see this. This has been gassed up for too long. This is the most legendary fight. All Might versus All for One in their first fight is definitely that fight for My Hero Academia, right? We definitely need to see, I think, a flashback of All Might and All for One's first true fight. But with that said, will we see a flashback of the other users against All For One? Because I feel like that could actually take up a decent chunk of this final arc, right? You could dedicate like a whole 5, 6 chapters, 10 chapters even, to just doing everyone's fights against All For One and transitioning to the next person's fight. So I definitely do wonder if we're going to end up seeing the previous users of One For All fighting against All For One in the past. And the way that I think we're going to see that is, I think during the end of the series where you have Deku going into the Vestige world, right, pretty much trying to save Tenko, I think we're going to see another one of those kind of like Vestige world flashbacks, right, where like, if you remember, the first user was able to show Deku All For One's kind of past, right? My kind of weird question there is, why did we see that from All For One's perspective? You know what I mean, right? Like we know that All For One's brother was locked away in a prison, right? So why did we see All For One's backstory from All For One's perspective? Is it just because he created One For All, right? Like maybe that's it. Maybe like he's technically a user, so you're able to, his memories and stuff like that are stored inside of One For All. But if that is the case, and even if it's not the case, because the vestige space that All For One and or that I guess Shigaraki and Deku were in at the same time is kind of like a shared vestige space between the both of them, I think that we might see some of All For One's memories played out in the Vestige world, right? And I think some of those memories are going to include various key moments that All For One has been involved in, likely, that we aren't 100% sure of all the details on, right? Like, I think we're going to see All For One finding Tenko and bringing Tenko home via flashback. I think we're going to see the fights between all the various Quirk users of One For All versus All For One in various flashbacks, whether it's just panels, whether it's dedicated sections in chapters. I do think we are going to see that. And I think we're going to see All For One versus All Might, right? I think we're going to see that as well. And to really specify, I do think we're going to see kind of more of a focus on Nana versus All For One, right? Because that is the kind of thing that really lends its most importance to Tenko. Tenko's dream was to be a hero. Obviously, Nana was the person that he saw as being the most heroic, but then he knows that, you know, his grandma abandoned him and whatnot. But I don't think he understands the pure context that Nana abandoned him because of All For One. Nana abandoned their family because of All For One. And seeing All For One causing all of that, and seeing All For One pretty much killing his grandma with a smile on his face and joking around, and like seeing All Might and everyone else being pretty much helpless to the real true evil here, I think to a certain extent that is going to very, very much help in freeing Tenko. I think Nana plays a very, very, very significant role in Shigaraki's psyche. The last hand that Shigaraki has is Nana's hand, literally the last hand that he has remaining, which I think is probably going to be in his pocket or something like that. I think it's still going to be on his person, right? I don't think All For One is able to get him to put that away. That last hand is Nana's hand. So I do think we are going to at least flash back to the Nana versus All For One fight. But with that, I really, really would like to see all of the other fights against the One For All users, especially All Might against All For One. And I'm questioning you guys, do you think we're ever going to see that, right? Do you think we are going to see that in the vestige space, or do you think we're not going to see that and maybe Horikoshi is going to skip past that and leave it to Bones, who we know is not going to do it, to make a kind of an anime original, whereas Bones is already skipping stuff and important material? Maybe he could leave it to them to kind of fill in that space and we can just keep our fingers crossed and hope that they do it. I really, really hope it gets done in the main manga, but you know, the fourth unsolved mystery that we're going to cover in this video, and this is kind of like a fan request, right? I know some people really, really want to see this one. What was in Deku's letter to Bakugo during the Vigilante Deku arc, right? We know that Deku left various messages to various people. I don't exactly remember in full detail how many people's letters we saw. I think we saw Ochako's. I don't remember seeing anyone else's, right? Maybe it's just because they weren't all that important to me. But I know specifically we did not see Bakugo's letter, the letter that Deku sent Bakugo, right? And after reading that letter, Bakugo obviously goes to save Deku along with the rest of the class. But whereas I feel like Deku's letter to Ochako was very touching and very, very needed in that moment to kind of get like, you know, a lot of thoughts across to each other and kind of really kind of give Ochako that like first person perspective of how Deku thinks, I feel like the same thing could definitely be said about Bakugo's letter. Bakugo's letter is definitely going to have some important stuff in it from like their childhood, mentions of stuff like that, mentions of like, you know, how Deku really, really thinks about Bakugo as a hero, as a person. So I definitely understand why a lot of fans want to get that letter as one of the more important side characters in the series to Deku's plot. I definitely think at some point, maybe at the very end, we are going to see what Deku wrote in that letter to Bakugo. But what could it be? You know what I mean? Like, hey, sorry, I'm leaving. Hold it down for me. You were always the best. something like that. Like, what could it be that got such a quick and immediate change out of Bakugo, right? Like, we know Bakugo's story has been progressing over the series. You know, he's kind of learned to accept Deku more and more as his true rival and stuff like that. But like, I have this weird feeling that Bakugo's like smiles and everything during the part where they were rescuing Deku was like him putting on a face. It was weird to see him smile and like joke about like Deku being the fake All Might and all that stuff. It kind of left the impression to me that whatever Bakugo read in that note really made him feel bad about the way that he treated Deku and the way that he allows Deku to like look at himself, and that he knows that a lot of that comes from the way that he treated Deku in the past. And that's why I think that led to that apology, right? But I really want to see it. Of course, I want to see specifically what led to Bakugo apologizing to Deku. And yeah, I feel like it's really important. I know it would make the Bakudekus happy. Let them have it. You know, let them have it. Everyone deserves a W sometimes. Let them have the note. I want to see what the note says myself for like rival purposes and for like, you know, keeping like the story cohesive so that we know. I like knowing why the background of like stuff happens. So knowing why Bakugo apologized to Deku specifically, like what specifically was said, I really want to know that, but also give the Bakudekus their W. I know they're dying to see it, so just give it to them, Horikoshi. Just let them have it. And the final mystery in My Hero Academia that we're going to cover in this video is what happened to Mezo Shoji's discrimination arc that Horikoshi teased way back. If you remember, I don't know what event it was in. I don't remember if it was in like a volume extra or something, but Horikoshi did let us know that there was an arc that he planned around Mezo Shoji, right? Where he was going to cover kind of like the way that people like Shoji, or I guess mutant quirk users, are treated in the world of My Hero Academia. And we've seen little sparks of that throughout the series. Like, mutant quirk users are treated pretty badly, or pretty much quirk users that don't look like regular, I guess what you would call it, regular people. And that might even be kind of playing into the quirkism that is present in the world, right? Where it's like, you're not a regular person. You look weird. Like, you look like a fish or a bird or like creature. So like, you know, they brought a lizard with them. You remember the CRC in the My Villain Academia arc? That kind of touched on that, but I feel like the CRC, or the Creature Rejection Clan, we know what that's based on, in My Hero Academia, is definitely a commentary on how people feel in the world, right? Like the dark underside to the world of quirks. There are many we've seen, but that's definitely one of the dark undersides to the world of quirks that we've seen. And we haven't seen a ton of that going on in the series, even though we do now have kind of like an army of mutant quirk users doing their best to fight for their rights and get revenge in this broken society. But I really think it would have been interesting to see Shoji's like kind of perspective on all of that, right? Or kind of to include him more so in all of that, or maybe including Shoji in like an arc with Spinner, or having them meet, because Spinner's kind of like the least villainous, I feel like, out of all the League of Villains members. I feel like he's the one who would be most likely to maybe be put in a situation where he could work with a UA student. And if you were going to put him in a situation with a UA student, I feel like why not make it Shoji, right? Like, Shoji was supposed to have this discrimination arc. I don't think we're really going to get to that. Like, maybe it won't end up being its own entire arc. Maybe it'll just be part of this finale, right? Where Shoji is kind of pivotal in the role to play against kind of getting the mutant quirk users back on the side of good and making them not want to destroy everything they see in their path, and instead following Shoji's example as a hero, right? But I don't know like where we're gonna go on that front, and it kind of saddens me because I feel like that could have been some really interesting stuff to get into. My Hero Academia Vigilantes gets into it a little bit, talking about how people who don't look like regular human beings are treated in the world and how it's not okay, and how the class structure is definitely a little different in the world of My Hero Academia because of the advent of quirks. But that is another thing that I don't know if we're gonna see, but I really hope we do see it, right? Like, what is the larger picture with the quirkism plotline, and will Mezo Shoji, otherwise known as Tentacle, play any larger role in the story, right? In that part of the story, or in the story at large in general, right? Like, will that really come to the forefront more as we wrap up Spinner's character? I guess we really did find the character that could be on Spinner duty without it being like bad for their character arc, right? Shoji being on Spinner duty and being the one to kind of like wrap that whole plotline up would really be cool, because again, we didn't get the discrimination arc that we were supposed to get with Shoji. So hopefully we do get it. And those are my top 5 unsolved mysteries in My Hero Academia for this video. You guys hit the goal in the last video. You guys got the comments. You guys got the like goal. So let's set the same one for this video. 500 likes and 150 comments, and we'll do the next one. And trust me, I've got these to go. There's a lot of unsolved questions left in My Hero Academia. I feel like putting them all in one video would just make it way too long. So I like doing them in these kind of chunks. And obviously, it's just more content for you guys. So let me know if that's what you want to see. Let me know anything else you want to see on this channel. And of course, tell me any answers to the questions that you've seen in this video, or give me new questions entirely, and we can keep the series going on a little longer with your questions. So what do you think is left to solve in My Hero Academia? This is Pineapple. I'll see you guys later. Peace.